is Neha Tulsyan from Crescent Creation. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today's video is part of Coffee Lovers blog Hop, and I'm featuring the Pumpkin Spice Season I Want It All bundle kit from Not2Shabby shop. It has a beautiful 6x6 paper pad along with an ephemera pack designed by Teresa. The stamp is illustrated by Jamie and the stencil is designed by Stacy Tideman. And I'm creating some fun and amazing mini slimline cards that are really easy to put together using these amazing products. And of course, since this video is a part of a hop, there are giveaways too. So go to Not2Shabby shop blog to get all the details. The link is in the description box below. To create my cards, I started with first creating my card bases. And since I'm creating mini slimline cards today, it was really easy to create these card bases using the 6x6 paper pad. I just scored my pattern paper at 3 inches and folded it in half to create my card bases. And now I have these white cardstocks that measures 2 3/4 by 5 3/4 inches. That's slightly smaller than my card bases, and I'm inking them up using Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink. I'm just inking all the 4 sides of these panels and leaving the center white. Since I'm using paper pads to create my card bases today, because of the pattern on the pattern paper, the inside and the outside of the card can become very busy. So I'm going to use these white ink blended panels to add layers to my cards and bring the focus to the design and not get distracted by the pattern paper. So once I've done my initial preparations, now I'll move on to creating my first card. For this card, I'm using this white ink blended panel and stenciling some leaves using Distress Oxide inks. I'm using Lucky Clover, Candied Apple, Aged Mahogany and Mustard Seed Distress Oxide inks here, and using my blending brushes, I'm inking up the leaves all over my panel. Along with the leaves design, the stencil also has the sentiment pumpkin in it, and I'm inking that up on a separate piece of white cardstock using Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink. Once I'm done inking this, I'll go ahead and clean my stencil off camera, and now I'll go ahead and cut this sentiment using my scissors. Next, I'll go ahead and assemble my card. Here I'm gluing my top panel on my card base using some double-sided tape. I'm using one of the ephemera die cuts from the ephemera pack and gluing it to the card using some double-sided foam tape. I've also added foam tape behind the pumpkin sentiment and gluing that just above the ephemera die cut. To embellish the card, I'm using some fall leaves clay bits from Crescent Creation shop, and I just love how beautiful it looks. And lastly, to finish off this card, I'm adding some glossy accents to the pumpkin sentiment. Since this sentiment is inked using Distress Oxide ink, make sure not to move the glossy accent quite a lot or you might end up smearing the whole sentiment. And that finishes my first card for today. Here is my second card. For my second card, I chose some leaf ephemera die cuts and I'm randomly gluing that all over my card base using some liquid glue. I've also added a sentiment banner towards the top left of the card base that says Pumpkin Spice Junkie. Once I'm done with the background, I'll bring out few more ephemera die cuts that I really like, and I'll go ahead and glue them towards the center of my card base, layering them all together and creating a beautiful bunch. Then I'll go ahead and add one of the fishtail sentiment strip from the ephemera pack using some foam tape. For the inside of my card, I'll go ahead and add one of those white ink blended panels. This gives me a good space to write a message for my recipient. And to match it all up, I'll go ahead and glue 2 ephemera die cuts to the inside of my card using some liquid glue. And that finishes my second card for today. For my third card here, I'm going to do something very unusual to create my background. I'm using my Guillotine trimmer to trim down the cover paper of the pattern paper pack. What I'm doing here is trying to make the most of my supplies. Most of the pattern paper comes with their design printed on the cover. And here I'm just trimming out those strips of pattern using my Guillotine trimmer to create my card background. Once I have all my strips trimmed down, I'll go ahead and glue these randomly onto the inked panel using some liquid glue. You can always cut these strips out of your pattern paper, but this was easy for me to just cut these out of the cover paper and get them all same size. Once I'm done with my background, I'll go ahead and trim off the excess using my scissors. And then I'll go ahead and glue all the ephemera die cuts towards the center of the panel, creating a focal point. Lastly, add the sentiment die cut using some liquid glue, and then I'll go ahead and glue this panel to a card base. And then I'll go ahead and decorate the inside of the card by adding that white ink blended panel and some ephemera die cuts using some liquid glue. And that finishes my third card for the day. My fourth card is also very similar to my third card. For this one, I started with trimming off some pattern paper to size to create a base for my design. I trimmed two pattern papers, one measures 2 by 3 inches and the other measures half inches by 3 inches. Now I'm going to go ahead and glue both of these to the bottom of my card base. Once done gluing, I'll trim off the excess using my scissors. And then I'll go ahead and glue my card front using some ephemera die cuts. I'll glue most of the die cuts using some liquid glue, layering them together to create a beautiful bunch. Here gluing the coffee using some foam tape. And lastly adding the sentiment die cut using some foam tape and liquid glue. Trimming off the excess that's hanging off the card, and that finishes my fourth card for today. And let's do a quick recap and I'll show you all the cards that I created today. The first one is the stencil background card. The second and the third card are almost similar and I showed you how I created one of them. The fourth card is the one where I used the cover of the paper pad to create my background. The fifth card is the last card I showed how to create. And the sixth card again matches the first one. The only difference is the sentiment that I white heat embossed on a black cardstock. So this was my video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. All the products are linked in the description box below. Don't forget to visit the Not2Shabby shop blog. The link is in the description box below. Thank you for visiting. Have a nice day.